Hi, class. My name's Spencer.
My name's Vanessa.
And we're doing chapter 4, Running for Your Life, the Anatomy of Survival. So we'll get right into it. So we're going to talk about the brain structure a little, in particular, the bottom-up brain structure we have. We know our brain's primary function is survival and everything else is secondary to that. But actually, our brain develops layer by layer from the bottom to the top, and that happens like within the womb. And at the very base of our brain, you can kind of see here is what is called the reptilian brain. It controls the basic life functions like breathing, sleeping, eating, all those things you kind of do automatically without even thinking about it. And above that, you have the limbic system, the mammalian brain. It's called mammalian because it's about like social behavior. It controls social behaviors, raising young, emotions, survival instincts, that kind of stuff. And together, those two, the reptilian and limbic system, form the emotional brain that guides instincts, preferences, and it protects us from danger. The emotional brain reacts really quickly and instantly. So when you like jump back from a rope because you think it's a snake, that would be your emotional brain reacting before your rational brain can start being like, well, that's a rope, not a snake, obviously. Um, but above the emotional brain is the neocortex. That is the rational brain. That outer layer is unique, not unique to us human, but it's what separates us from the other animals. The frontal lobes grow rapidly in our early childhood, and we often associate with the age of reason. Being able to do things like self-control, using complex language, understanding abstract ideas, that is because of the rational brain. So pretty much in short, the emotional brain is fast, instinctive, while the rational brain is slower and more thoughtful. The emotional brain keeps us safe, but the rational brain allows us to make deliberate choices, think ahead, and create complex solutions. We're going to talk a little about neural pathways. Uh, so we're looking at the sensory information, how that travels through the brain. So the information we get from all our senses, like touch, taste, all those gather in the thalamus. And as it arrives in the thalamus then creates a like conscious memory, a unified experience. So people often call the thalamus the cook because it's taking all these different ingredients, senses, and making a single experience that we can understand. And once the thalamus processes the information, it sends it in two directions. One path to the amygdala, which is in the deep limbic system, the emotional brain, um, and the amygdala will react quickly and automatically to any potential danger. It's our like fight and flight responses before we're even aware of that situation. But the other path that it sends the info to is to our frontal lobe, where the information reaches our conscious awareness. But that pathway is slower. It's a few milliseconds longer. So it allows us to think about what is happening and evaluate the situations. Um, and Joseph Lido called these pathways the low road and the high road. The low road goes to the amygdala and is fast, and the high road goes to the frontal cortex, and it takes a few milliseconds longer. But together, these pathways balance like speed and accuracy in how our brain responds to the world and keeps us safe. It can react quickly while also eventually, hopefully, trying to get a deeper understanding and think through the situations as well. Now, these are two terms that were mentioned a lot in the chapter, the smoke detector and the watchtower. The amygdala is our smoke detector because it like quickly responds, quickly decides. Um, it uh, it triggers the fight and flight. It releases stress hormones and prepares us to run. Um, but above the amygdala is the medial prefrontal cortex, what they referred to as the brain's watchtower. The watchtower gives us a kind of like higher level view of the situation and helps us decide whether threat is real or a false alarm. For example, the amygdala or the smoke detector might sense the smoke coming, sense there's danger, but it's our watchtower that helps us decide is this coming from a fire or just a burnt piece of toast? Is it something we actually need to be worried about? Um, and when the watchtower is working properly, it can calm down the amygdala and prevent unnecessary fight or flight reactions. And this allows us to stay in control of our behavior. However, trauma can weaken the watchtower's control, and when that happens, the amygdala can override our rational judgment, it causes strong reactions to situations that aren't really dangerous. Um, and so that can come out as like snapping at someone over a minor comment or when we freeze in fear. And understanding these systems helps us see why stress affects our emotions so much and why practices like mindfulness, breathing, and yoga can help strengthen that watchtower to restore that balance.
I'll talk about some responses to trauma. Most people probably know this, but trauma changes people. They don't react to things the same way anymore. They become focused on suppressing their inner chaos instead of living spontaneously. Trauma isn't stored as a clear memory, but in the body and emotional brain. The brain becomes more sensitive to danger and reacts quickly, often before the thinking part of the brain has time to figure out what is going on. If the brain's alarm system is activated, it can trigger pre-programmed physical escape plans. Our conscious mind can be shut down when the old brain takes over, and this can lead to run, hide, fight, or freeze. The body can react before we are aware of what is going on. When the fight, flight, or freeze response is successful, the body calms down and the person starts to feel normal again. But when that response is blocked, doesn't take effect, the brain keeps releasing stress hormones and stays on edge. Even when the threat doesn't exist, the brain can keep sending signals. If someone can find a way to protect themselves, can play a role on if the traumatic experience will have long-term scars. Trying to control psychological reactions can lead to physical symptoms like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and other autoimmune diseases. Trauma can disrupt sleep, appetite, digestion, and reactions to touch, throwing the body off of balance. Many psychological problems show up as issues with basic functions like sleeping, eating, digestion, and arousal. Because of this, effective trauma treatment needs to address these basic body functions, not just thoughts or emotions. We are constantly responding to and experimenting with our environment. The authors of Understanding and Responding to the Effects of Trauma in the Classroom said, what is traumatic to one person may not be to another. They also said trauma is defined by a person's response rather than the event itself. This article talks about how trauma affects people differently, and responses can vary depending on experiences and context. Trauma is subjective, differences are normal and expected. Let's go to the next slide and talk about depersonalization and flashbacks. Depersonalization is when someone feels detached from themselves, from their own thoughts, body, or emotions. It's like they are watching their body or thoughts from a distance or feeling unreal. This can happen when someone has experienced trauma or intense stress. Many experiencing depersonalization still know what is real, but everything can feel distant or unreal. It can happen after trauma as the brain tries to protect itself from overwhelming experiences. Flashbacks happen because trauma memories are stored differently in the brain. They are stored in the emotional and sensory part of the brain, not the logical thinking part. When something reminds the body of the trauma, a trigger, the brain can react as if the trauma is happening again, even if it's not. The brain's alarm system takes over during a flashback, and the thinking part of the brain goes offline. This is why people might be scared or confused and have a hard time putting what they're experiencing into words. A flashback isn't just remembering something bad, the person is reliving it. The body reacts with the same reactions it had in the original trauma. For example, same racing heart, muscle tension, or feeling frozen. This happens automatically and is not something the person chooses. Let's go to the next slide. Misinterpreting situations based on trauma. Like I said earlier, people who've experienced trauma may feel unsafe and misread situations as threatening, even if there is no danger. They act like the traumatic event is happening again, and their brain responds to the past, not current. After experiencing trauma, people may struggle to interpret if a situation is safe or dangerous. A faulty alarm system can cause people to blow up or shut down to harmless comments or facial expressions. This can lead to misinterpretations and misunderstandings in relationships. Relationships work best when people can accurately judge whether others are a threat or not. Also, like I've said earlier, people who have experienced trauma might feel unsafe and misread situations as threatening if there is no danger. They might respond to past experiences instead of what is currently happening. Earlier, I talked about memories being stored in the emotional brain and body, which can make people not understand why they suddenly feel unsafe. Sounds, movements, tone of voice, facial expressions, and physical sensations can be reminders of trauma. They can be triggers. A study in 2019 called Appraisal Biases about Strangers in Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder said experiencing traumatic events can shatter the fundamental assumptions that people have about themselves, others, and the world. The study found that people with PTSD don't automatically see strangers more negatively than others do, but they might have a harder time changing their first negative impression even after hearing positive things. The article also talks about how trauma can make people react strongly to negative cues, even when there's no real danger. This fits with the idea that trauma can distort how someone interprets the world. Let's go to the next slide.
Okay. On these next two slides, we're going to look at the brain scans of Stan and Oot. If you read the chapter, Stan and Oot is a couple that got in a car crash. It was an 87 car pileup. They were worried for their own lives. They thought they were going to die. They heard and saw people around them dying. So it was a very intense experience, but their brains reacted differently. In this slide, we can kind of see Stan's brain. And Stan's been experiencing flashbacks through his trauma. He kind of his amygdala is can't tell the difference between the past trauma and the present moment when it is brought up again. It causes his body to react as if he's still in danger, even when he is safe. So if you look at Stan's brain scan, you can see this top and right and left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, these two white areas. And these are the parts of the brain that act as the timekeeper. They help link us to the past, the present, the future. But in Stan's trauma, it becomes deactivated, and that can make people feel trapped in the moment, losing any sense of time and perspective. Well, these two lower dots on the scan show the thalamus. And as we know, the thalamus usually acts as the cook. It collects sensory information and it integrates it into a coherent memory. But during Stan's trauma and flashbacks, the thalamus shuts down, which is why these traumatic experiences are often remembered as isolated images, sounds, and physical sensations rather than a clear story. So, helping someone with this, you'd often want to help them get grounded in the present as they talk about it. So, that can be different mindfulness exercises to help them feel in their own body. We kind of used one in class a while ago, even like sensing or touching a treat or a snack. And then we have Oot's scan, and you can see right off the bat it's very different. It's pretty much blank. And this is because Oot responds with depersonalizations when she recalls the trauma. She kind of just disassociates and disconnects from her own brain. But interestingly enough, her physical symptoms pretty much stay the same. So, like her heart rate and blood pressure don't actually change at all. Um, and so, yeah, depersonalization is when she disconnects and she's feeling separate from her own emotions and her bodily sensations. And in a 2019 study by Ty and colleagues, um, it is shown that depersonalization is strongly linked to childhood trauma and is a common dissociative survival response. Through that, we can kind of guess, based on what we do know about Oot as well, that this was a survival strategy earlier in her life. When her mother treated her harshly, she would just go numb and help her get away from these overwhelming situations. In cases like Oots, you'd want to use bottom-up therapy. And that can be helpful because they can focus on reconnecting the body and the nervous system through things like movement, breath, and sensation, rather than only on talking or thinking about the trauma.
Our textbook gave us an example of response. It was during 9/11. On September 11th, there was a 5-year-old named Naom. I might have got that name wrong, but his classroom was less than 1,500 feet away from the World Trade Center. So he saw the first plane crash. He was able to run and escape during the disaster, which made himself an active participant in his own survival. After he was home safe, his brain's alarm bells went off in his head. This helped him process what had happened. That the day after, he drew a picture of what happened with a trampoline at the bottom of the building so people could jump and be safe. That is the picture that is shown. I'm not too sure where the trampoline is, but it's at the bottom to help people. He used his imagination to work through what he saw. Children rely on their caregivers with emotional guidance and to understand what is going on during disasters. When caregivers stay calm and responsive, children are less likely to develop long term psychological effects and harms. And that is our side.
Awesome. Here's our reference page. We appreciate you all being with us.
Thank you.
Bye.